Boom. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Tech Chief channel. We're going to talk about something a little peculiar tonight. Just a little bit. It's actually not that big of a deal for some people, but for other people, it kind of is. And one thing that I have actually had not a lot of trouble with in my life is this whole going through the interview process. And I've been doing interviews for jobs since I was like 16 years old, guys. So yes, times changed a lot since then, but after doing a lot, you learn a thing or two. And tonight, we're going to talk about the entirety of the interview process. And I will add that most of this information I'm going to tell you guys, you could use regardless of if you're actually applying for like a software engineer or a tech or a software developer type of job. But I am going to talk to you guys about it in the nuanced perspective of that. Okay. Software engineering, software developer, et cetera, because it is a little bit different. Usually when you go apply at a place like McDonald's, they're not going to ask you to do like a take-home code test, or they're not going to ask you to do something like write code in front of them. Okay. Camus says, just put the pronouns in your bios, bro. Yeah, that'll help. They'll definitely help. Patricia says, yo, greetings from the southern hemisphere. It's freezing down here. Is it really? What temperature is it down there right now, Patricio? Because it is most certainly not freezing down here or up here. Yeah, we're going to be up from you, Patricio, not down. So I want you guys to think about the software engineering interview process, or like, I'm just going to say software engineer. Okay. Insert any one of the 5,000 different developer titles, role titles that you get on paper, insert that into software engineering interview. Okay. Or software engineer. I think a lot of the stuff that I'm about to talk about for some people is common sense, but it's not after observing it. And that's not to disparage anybody who doesn't know these types of things. But after you guys listen to this, hopefully that sense will be a little bit more common to you all. So on this interview process, through the entirety of it, and don't worry, we're going to talk about the whole process itself. During this whole process, for the most part, it really is just a game. Okay. I have a recorded video that I didn't do live maybe like a year ago, and the title was Software Engineering Interview. It's just a game. That's basically going to expand upon that tonight, but if you guys go and watch that, or if you've seen that video, you're going to get the gist of pretty much what I'm talking about tonight in that video. So what makes it a game? Why is it a game? Well, there's a company, and let's just say, you're applying for a traditional job, a good old traditional W-2 job. Hey, you might even be applying for a company, and you might be applying as a private contractor. You might be doing 1099 work, 1099 master race, checking in. The company that you are applying to, so the company itself, the entity that is trying to hire you and or one or more other people to fill a position, they're playing a game. Okay, the person, as in the actual person that you're going to talk to during the interview process, and that's probably going to be multiple people, that person is playing a game because they have to, because they're getting paid to do that. And you are actually also playing a game, even if you don't realize it. Okay. A lot of the times people can do dumb things in interviews, and they'll just say stuff that is or could be considered to be poor etiquette. All right. And we're gonna discuss what that would be, but point of this is that it's all just really a game. All right. And this is true for most fields of work. Like I said at the beginning of this video, this can apply to honestly almost any kind of job out there, except when you get to the part where it's nuanced for like a developer position. But how do games work, guys? Like most games, you have levels, right? And you can't get to level 10 unless you beat level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 first. So I want everyone to think about each process, each step in the interview process. That's going to be like a level. Okay. And if you want to get the job, you have to beat the last level where there is a final boss. All right. You can't get to the last level unless you beat the first level and the second and third and the fourth and so on. Pretty common sense, right? I think everyone gets what I am trying to say. It's winter in Rodriguez's land, indeed. Do toilets flush in reverse down there? Or was I sold a lie again? Patricio, do toilets flush in reverse down there? Let us know. Okay, so, and actually, you know what, guys? Why don't we whiteboard this out? Let's do that. Let's break out the good old heckin' whiteboard. And let's show you guys how this is structured out. All right. So, if we're talking about games here, we have to start at level 1, right? What is level 1? And keep in mind, if this is level 1, and then this is the final level, you can't get here unless you pass over here, all right? Common sense, right? Everybody gets what I'm saying? So level 1, guys, this is going to be primarily a phone screener, most likely, all right? It could be anywhere between 15 to 30 to 45 minutes, maybe sometimes an hour in some odd cases. But for the most part, let's just say 30 minutes, and it's going to be a 30-minute phone screener. Now, level 1, most likely, 95-ish% of the time, especially if it's a larger company, this is going to be someone in the human resources department. And if they're not directly in the human resources department, they're going to be in some kind of like subset of human resources type position. Maybe the company actually has a hiring department, and maybe this person is staffed in the hiring department. So, for example, they have a department where they literally have workers who their job is to go out and find good candidates to fill other positions that are open and in need in the company. Okay? So, for all intents and purposes, let's just assume that level 1 is Karen or Susie from HR. Now, what do we know about Karen and Susie from HR? Most likely, especially if you're applying for like a software developer or a software engineer position, Susie or Karen from HR doesn't know how to code, right? Susie and Karen from HR, they're not tech-oriented people per se. Even if it's like at a tech company, they're most likely not going to know things like what a stored procedure is, or what literally anything that involves code, or what we call talking shop. Okay. So these people that you're going to talk to, you can't quote unquote talk shop with them. And what do I mean by talking shop? Talking shop. So for example, guys, if you are a car guy and you have a friend who's also a car guy, and you have like 3 other people in the room with you guys who don't know anything about cars, and you start telling your friend, hell yeah, brother, I just got them set of 37s that I'm putting on that bad boy, and then I got me a catback exhaust with a 93 octane ECU tune. Like you're using words and verbiage in a linear manner to talk to somebody to describe like something that you're doing with your car, right? The other people in the room, they're not going to know what you're talking about, and we could consider that to be called talking shop. Okay. So Susie and Karen from HR, they don't really know much about tech, so you can't talk shop with them. However, guys, they do know a couple things. One, they do know buzzwords and flashy phrases, which they're told to look for. And 2, they know what your resume looks like because they should have it right in front of them. So they know what they know some words that they think or they're told they should look out for, these buzzwords, and they also know what you have on your resume in front of them. Most likely, let's just say you didn't know how to code at all. If you spent enough time learning how to communicate or kind of like use these buzzwords, and at least maybe you knew like a little bit about code, you most likely could pass this first step very easily, especially if you're a people person. If you can famous people, this step won't be hard for you at all. Now, if you did do that and you get to the next couple steps, you might be out of luck because you can't really famous these next few steps. Most likely, some companies you're not going to be. Some companies that might not even code test you, but anyway, most likely you can't. But let's just say you do know how to code and you know good bit about tech. Honestly, guys, a lot of people who are like really smart people, they have their biggest problem that they have is level 1 because they either overcomplicate things for Susie in HR and maybe potentially end up making her feel stupid, or they're just poor communicators, right? And that's a commonality between like especially like programmers. There's a lot of programmers who are not very like sociable people and they have a hard time communicating, which it just be like that. What up, Tom? Good to see you. Sometimes it's like the OG Mario where you can skip the last level though. My pronouns are Chad/Chad. Those are great pronouns. Those are great pronouns indeed. In fact, Tom, I would love to have those pronouns. So how do you beat level 1? First off, you should do some research on the company. All right. You should have at least read the job description for the company that you're actually interviewing at. And you should know whether or not they do like .NET programming, whether or not the position you're applying for is like a front end developer or whatever. You should know the specifics of the tech that you're for the position that you're applying for. Okay. So what you can do to not overcomplicate things is you just use a couple of buzzwords. So if Susie and Kuzin says, or Karen from HR says, have you done anything with SQL? You don't have to tell her, yeah, I regularly write stored procedures all the time. You could just say, or you probably should just say, yes, I have about 3 years of experience in various different SQL databases, and I have no problem doing any SQL at all. And if they look at your resume and they're like, that's on there, well, then you're going to make Susie or Karen from HR feel very, very, very comfortable proceeding you on to the next step. And what is the next step? The next level, rather? I know my handwriting is beautiful, isn't it, guys? So level 2, guys. Level 2 is probably going to be some kind of Zoom or phone interview, most likely Zoom, and it's going to be with either like the hiring manager on the team, so like the manager of the team that is hiring the current position, or it's going to be like someone high up on the team, or most likely level 2, guys. Most likely level 2, you're going to be talking to somebody who is at least a little bit tech oriented. All right, it could be like the manager of the team. And that guy could have coded for like 15 years and then hasn't coded in the last 8 years. So he probably doesn't know with all the cool, hip, trendy stuff. But if you talk shop to him, he's going to understand what you're saying. So we'll just call level 2 team manager. At least if he's a good manager. If he's a good manager, he's probably like knows a little bit about code. Although there are some managers of some companies who just like don't even know anything about code, and they happen to be managing a bunch of engineers, which that's not usually the best thing ever. But level 2, guys, if you know what you're talking about and you've already famoosed Karen or Susie from HR, then from here, if you know what you're talking about, if you talk shop to this guy or this Zer, excuse me, I didn't want to inaccurately put a wrong PRONOUN to somebody's title. If you can talk shop to these people, they're going to know that you know what you're talking about. And they probably aren't going to, at this point, whiteboard you or do some kind of like coding test. We're going to talk about that because that's the next step. They're probably just going to get a better feel of whether or not you actually know anything about code, whether or not your resume is true, and whether or not Susie or Karen from HR made a poor choice in pushing you forward to the next level. So let's say you do know how to code because hopefully you've been learning a little bit before you go interview for these positions, and you talk shop with this guy and it works out. He's like, all right, cool. He actually was able to explain some things and he seems like he's actually done something with code before. Let's push him on to level 3. And what is level 3 going to be? Well, we'll just call this CT for coding test. All right. Now, sometimes, guys, sometimes you don't even have a coding test. Believe it or not, sometimes you don't even have a coding test at all. They might already trust you enough after level 2 and looking at your resume, and maybe you're recommended by someone who they trust. So maybe this step doesn't even happen, but let's say that you didn't get your foot in the door because someone recommended you or anything like that. And let's say this is your first software engineer or software developer job. You most likely, if the company is not absolutely stupid, they're going to put you through some kind of coding test. Okay. Now, this coding test at level 3, this can either be something that you take home. So then maybe they're like, all right, guys, all right, sir and or zer, here's some work. Go write. Here's like a little brief like take home test. Go finish it. And you got like 24, 48, whatever amount of days or hours to finish this. All right. That's usually the best case scenario, because anything else they would do aside from that is they might literally do what we call whiteboarding you. And what they'll do is they'll pull up a big old whiteboard, or they'll bring in a piece of paper, or they might be kind enough to bring a computer. And they're like, all right, you said you know Java. Write us a Java program that traverses a binary tree. That usually sucks. And like, if you are an engineer out there, you know what I'm talking about. Most of that stuff you don't like go memorize, right? That's what you use Google for. You memorize the process of making a computer, figuring out how to make a computer do what you want it to do. Not so much these like algorithms from a textbook from the 1990s, right? Not that those algorithms are bad, but most likely most of us can't traverse a binary tree from memory. If you can, that's fucking awesome. But chances are that's not really the case. Max Nita says just up, up, down, down, left, right, A, B, start, bro. Yes, exactly. Resume is true. Code tests are homework for not only you, but also the team. Yeah, because the team's going to have to go and take the time to like make sure that you actually did it right. Unless they're lazy, then they won't do that at all. But most likely, be hopeful that they're going to give you some kind of take home thing. And since we're in 2022, and we all know now that going into this thing called an office is getting less and less relevant, except for Tesla people. Oof, sorry, Tesla people. Didn't mean to rub salt in the womb. Most likely, you're going to be on Zoom, and it'll be probably a little bit less intimidating, because the problem is a lot of people, some people are work really good under pressure and some people don't. And when you're put under pressure and it's with like a group of people that you don't know and you don't have any credibility with, and also it's like a spur of the moment, here, go do this kind of thing. Even if you're smart enough to do those things regularly on your own, you might mess up a little bit, because you're like you're out of your zone, right? You're out of your zone. But if that's not a problem for you, then hopefully you know enough about code to be able to pass this. And one of the like best things you guys can do is, let's say you don't get any Google, you don't get any kind of book or cheat sheet to go off of. They're just basically raw dogging it. They're like, all right, dude, code on this piece of paper. Some places will do that, make you code on a piece of paper, and they ask you a problem that you really don't know how to do off the top of your head. What you should do is this, guys. You should tell them this. I haven't done this before, but I will, at the very best, try to walk through the process that I would take to go and solve type of problem in front of you guys. So at least if you preface it like that and you go and do that, and you at least go through the normal steps that you would on your own, all alone at home, to try to work through some kind of whatever problem it is, and you can show them your process of doing that, even if you get it wrong. Let's just say they're grading you at a points, which some of these places actually put points on you during interview process. But out of 100 points per question, and you get the question wrong, and let's say you get the question wrong, you're like, hey, I don't know how to do that. Next. Okay, you're going to get a 0. But if you walk through it and you try to step through the process and you show them the process that you would be taking upon doing that, maybe you'll get 50, 60, 70, maybe even 80 points out of that 100, okay? Other than that, like whiteboarding you in person, making you code on paper, or a take-home test, usually Usually, guys, this is like the last step. Okay. Or the second last step, but this is the last step. Most likely that's going to determine whether or not they want to actually extend you an offer for a job. Okay. And sometimes, my friends, sometimes depending on like a couple different situations. So let's just say you pass this. All right. Let's say you pass the level that we just talked about. Sometimes you might actually go back to step 2 and then go back to level 3. And maybe you'll even do that a third time and go back to level 3. Now, why does that happen? All right, there's a couple reasons. Like maybe this company has like 20 job positions open, and the first position that they were like that you were technically interviewing for, maybe the person thought like, hey, this guy's pretty good and he knows a lot and he probably could do this job, but we specifically want someone who's really good at whatever certain specific thing. And you were only mediocrely good at a certain thing. And they're like, but this guy's solid. Like, we don't want to lose him. And maybe there's another team with a different hiring manager that has probably could facilitate your skill set more than the current team. So they'll send you over to that hiring manager, and that hiring manager will do the same thing. And then maybe you do it like 2 or 3 times, and then maybe you could have been liked and good enough for all 3 of the places. And then at that point, they're going to start arguing like, hey, who can use this person best? All right. So you might circulate through steps level 2 and level 3 a couple times, but let's say you didn't. Let's just say you beat level 3, and then you have to go to the final boss. And that's the final level, right? Now, this is going to be the negotiation part. And this part is honestly the best part, especially if you know how to negotiate and it's not your first job and you actually have some credibility and you've established yourself as someone in this field. Then just know that most likely right off the bat, unless they're very desperate, and let's just say they're desperate, maybe even a little desperate, but you're really fucking good. Like, you're really good. You have like 10 years of experience doing the specific thing that they want you for. They have a hard time finding someone who has similar experience and who's as competent at this skill as you. Well, then in that case, they might offer you like they might blow their full load on their first offer, right? But most of the time, they're not going to do that. Most of the time, they're going to offer you the least amount that they think you're going to accept, okay? And maybe it's not quite up to par with what you wanted. And if you know that and you are that type of person, and I'm not talking about, your first job, all right? Maybe you can negotiate a little bit in your first job, but most likely your second and onward jobs that you're going to be interviewing for, you're going to be able to ask for a lot more and be able to, we'll just say, swing your Zer stick around a little bit more than most other people would. And if they do that, let's just say that this position, they got people in there on the internet who are put reviews for this position that they've worked at this company for before, and they were getting paid $200,000 a year, and they're offering you $189,000 a year. Well, you basically just politely tell them, you can either tell them right away, you can tell them, I really like this company, and I really like this job, and I really like the offer, but it would be a little bit easier for me if you guys could just give me $199,000 a year, or just go right to the 200, whatever you feel comfortable with. Right? It's going to be kind of a lot to like ask for like $50,000 more, depending on like the range that you're in or what type of job it is. But anywhere between like $1,000 to $15,000 more per year, that's not absurd. All right. Now they might come back and push you down a little bit more at that point, because they're going to try to meet you in the middle mark. And at that point, like when you're given your first counteroffer, you should always overstep just a little bit, unless you know the actual ranges they're paying for people in this position at the company. If you just overstep a little bit and you know that their counteroffer is going to come, they're going to send you a counteroffer and come back. So maybe you ask for $15,000 a year more, and they end up saying, okay, we'll give you $12,500 a year more. At that point, I would, unless you have some kind of reason to, I would probably just take it and call it a day. And once you finish that part, I mean, you're pretty good. You're pretty good to go. And there's nothing else left. You got the job, and yay, I got a little 6-figure job. Yay, hooray. Clap. And you can prepare for the next job if that's what you want to do. Most likely, if you're trying to continually level up and make more money and get more hands-on experience, different fields, you're going to want to do that. But the final part and the first level and the final level, guys, the first level and the final level, the smartest people have the hardest time with, okay? And usually the people who are the least like technically smart have the easiest time with level 1 and the final level. All right? That's because it takes a little bit of like social skills and knowing when you can overstep a boundary a little bit and when to not overstep boundaries a little bit. And vice versa, like usually the people who are less technically savvy but more social savvy are going to have an easier time at the first and the last level, but a harder time with these levels in the middle, right? Poor Tesla people. Yeah, I don't know what that was all about. That's a really weird thing that Elon did. There must be some kind of reason for this. Max says my last interviewer made me write code on the sidewalk in chalk halfway through the interview. It started raining. Well, knowing the company that you work for, Microsoft, I'm not surprised, Mr. Max Ignitas, that Bill Gates came out there and made you go and write code and chalk on the sidewalk. Good grief. I guess Elon isn't so cool after all. 75K bonus win. Yeah, that position I was posted in the chat today was pretty good. That was a pretty good job offer. Thanks, Tom, earlier. Is one of you guys going to grab that? You guys most certainly should. Cody Moose, I'm looking at you, Cody Moose in the hoose. That would be a good one for you, dude. And Alexander and Jai Win. All three of you guys would probably be good fits for that job. But all right, guys, I hope that made sense because like some people don't really even know what to expect going through this process. And yeah, sometimes there's going to be a little bit of like differentiation going on, like these like steps. Okay. I've actually had I think it was my third job. They didn't code test me at all. But there was like on that level, on the second level, there was like an hour and a half conversation of a guy who was asking me all this stuff about C# and .NET, and he was pretty thorough. Like it was basically like a verbal phone test, but it was for that job. It was like step 1, HR phone screener. Step 2, talk with a guy who was high up on the team, and he asked me like an hour and a half about like C# and .NET. Step 3, negotiation. That was it. But for the most part, it actually is going to end up being just like this 95-ish% of the time. Okay. So if you haven't been through an interview yet, this is what you most likely can expect. And honestly, like one thing I would say, and I have some people in my group, like I recommend them to do this too. And there's nothing wrong with doing this. Even if you don't think that you're technically smart enough or you haven't learned enough to actually do the job yet, it's not a bad idea to go and like interview for some places just to get warm, just to get comfortable, and just to get kind of like some exposure and some familiarity with the process. Because if you do that, it's going to be a whole lot easier. And you're just going to, honestly, if you did like 10 warm-up interviews, and let's just say you're applying to all these places that you don't give a diddly hoot about, all right? First of all, you don't care. You know, if you actually go all the way to the end and you get the job offer, like you're not going to take it because these are just warm-up interviews. You're just practicing, right? So you're going to actually perform better in those interviews. And then after you're done, you're going to feel a lot more confident in your ability to go and do these interviews. And there's nothing wrong with if someone has a problem like doing the interview process, even if you're a brilliant programmer, because believe it or not, some of the smartest people, the best developers, people that are in my community, they should have been working and got hired a lot longer than they actually did. And it was not because of they weren't like this, they weren't skilled enough. It was because like sometimes people who are very smart, very like left-brained people, it's a little bit harder for them to go through this interview process because the interacting with the humans part is a little bit just weird to them. The interview process and the job itself are two entirely different skills. Yep. Yeah, it's true. And you know what, too? A lot of people that are like, let's just say you are like a brilliant developer and you're an 18 or 19-year-old kid and you take your first interview and you're just like fumbling the whole time. You weren't even, you couldn't express yourself good enough to Susie and HR to get past level 1. And you're going to think to yourself, man, I must really not be good. I'll probably never be able to do this. Meanwhile, some dumbass who doesn't know anything about code just famoose past level 1, past Karen and Susie in HR with zero issue. That's because it's two completely different skills. And you got to learn a little bit about both if you actually want to get anywhere past just being an engineer for your entirety of your life. Some people don't, but Cody agrees with you. Some people don't, and that's totally cool. But that is something I noticed. You're gonna at least need to know a little bit about basic communication skills with other human beings. Human being. In order to do that, in order to even get the job in the first place. Once you do that, the first one, guys, it gets a little bit easier after that. Every time you get another job or you have some kind of accomplishment in the field, you put another check mark on your list, on your resume, and you establish like a little bit more clout. And the next interview, you're not going to have to like prove yourself as much as you did the first one. And your third, fourth, fifth, it just compounds over and over again. And let's just say you can run off of your clout a little bit more than for someone who is their first time. So essentially, guys, getting hired, yeah, you got to know the skills. All right. You got to know the bare minimum of the skills to do the job that you are applying for. But inevitably, it is all just a game. And just like everything else that is a game in life, you have to be able to use your gift of gab. All right. You got to give them 1-2 punch. You gotta just be polite, be thorough with your communication. Don't overly complicate it. Don't undercomplicate it. Take a look at your target, the person that you're currently interviewing with, whether it's Susie from HR at level 1 or it's the the team lead for level 3, and adjust your tonality, adjust the verbiage, adjust things that you're saying according to who it is. So if it's Susie, tone it down a little bit. If it's the team lead from level 3, tone it up a little bit. All right. As always, I hope you guys learn something out of that. Learn to code, learn to change your own tire. Just heckin' self-custody your own crypto. Get that shit off of an exchange. And yeah, I can't help you change the tire. I'm so sorry. You're going to have to go to Google to figure that out.